Saturday, October 23rd, 2021, 5:25 a.m., room 312, SOHO Boutique Hotel, Tak City, Thailand. My 2 nights at the SOHO have ended way too fast. I'll be sad to leave. However, my mystery benefactor also booked me 3 nights at a nice hotel in Kamphaeng Phet, where I'm riding to today. The hotel is called the Fig Boutique Hotel. It's interesting that the name follows the same pattern as the SOHO. It's a boutique hotel, assuming having that in the name actually means something. And the name is capitalized. That makes me think it is also an acronym. I wonder what FIG stands for, and why is it a boutique hotel? From the pictures, it looks like a very nice hotel with large and comfortable rooms. I don't know what is considered boutique about it. I associate the word boutique with places that are small, with perhaps a heavy emphasis on design. The SOHO and the Fig don't strike me as boutique-style places. Door to door on the main road, the Fig is listed as 74 kilometers away. I plan, of course, to take smaller roads, so the distance will be a bit more than that. However, I don't anticipate a long or arduous day. It's actually closer than my guest house in Mae Sot. With that in mind, I don't need to leave super early. As before, I'm going to take my time and eke out as much enjoyment out of this SOHO room and SOHO breakfast as I can, and leave later. Yesterday was an interesting day. Another national holiday in Thailand snuck up on me. I had no idea it was a holiday weekend, but it is. October 23rd is Chulalongkorn Day, which celebrates the reign of King Rama V. I did a bit of reading about this king yesterday, and I learned that he was Thailand's modernizing monarch. Thailand was known as Siam at that time, of course. He ascended to the throne of Siam in 1868 when he was just 15 years old. And he assumed the crown in 1873 when, I guess, he was 20 years old. He remained king until his death at the age of 57 on October 23, 1910. He instituted a number of reforms in his lifetime, including the abolition of slavery. He adopted the Gregorian calendar. He organized the country into provinces and districts. I believe the postal system and the first railroad was built during his time as king. He was also instrumental in keeping Siam free from European colonization. As part of his efforts to keep Siam independent and to modernize the country, he traveled extensively and studied modern methods of government in various countries, including countries in Europe. He established relationships with European rulers. He studied English with a tutor named Anna Leonowens. Anna's experience in Thailand's royal court was captured in a book by Margaret Landon called Anna and the King of Siam. And that book was turned into the famous musical and film called The King and I. There is the story that he would dress up as a normal person and walk around Siam in secret to understand the lives and possible hardships of ordinary people. He is now one of Thailand's most beloved rulers from history. I didn't have specific plans for the day, but after some poking around on Google Maps, I decided to explore Tak City on foot rather than get back on my scooter. I thought that as I walked around, I could keep my eyes open for any statues of King Rama V and see if people were leaving any offerings there. And I decided to walk along the Ping River and visit 2 places, both of which were associated with history. The first was the Tak City Memorial Museum, and the second was the Ban Chin Alley, an alley filled with impressive homes that once belonged to wealthy Chinese merchants. To my surprise, the museum was actually open, and I found it without much difficulty. My experience of the museum was not as pleasant as I'd hoped. I was simply too hot to really relax. And just as I arrived and got organized for my visit, the GoPro overheated and shut down again. And I decided to switch over to the Pocket 2. Just the whole process of switching cameras mid-experience got me flustered and out of sorts. And the museum did not have any information in English. I was reduced mainly to just looking at a bunch of random items that apparently were connected to the history of Tak City. A woman did approach me at one point and offer to answer any questions I might have. She was the official English-speaking tour guide for the museum. I didn't really take advantage of her offer, though. I generally prefer to experience places on my own, and I don't get much enjoyment out of being guided. The highlight for me was the museum building itself. It was a large and beautiful two-story wooden structure, and it was a pleasure to simply walk around its various rooms and up and down the staircases. The wooden floors had been polished to within an inch of their lives, and they gleamed in the sunlight coming in from the windows. The Ban Chin Alley was just a short distance away from the museum, and I spent an hour or two strolling up and down the alley and taking in the old houses. This alley had been developed heavily for tourism, and there were a fair number of plaques providing information and QR codes to websites. However, they were all in Thai. And it wasn't possible to go inside any of these buildings or even onto the grounds. They still served as private homes after all, but it was pleasant to take it all in from the street. The problems I faced were the two that have become common: the heat and camera failures. It was midday and the sun was beating down strongly, and this affected me and my GoPro. I began sweating profusely, and my GoPro just gave up. It overheated and shut down in short order. I decided not to mess around this time, and I just put it away instantly and got out the Pocket 2. I have to say that as much as I love the Pocket 2 in many situations, it can be difficult to use out in the rough and tumble real world. The main problem I faced yesterday is that I often struggle to understand where the camera is pointing. The gimbal is often pointing in strange directions, usually far too high. I think I am aiming the camera straight ahead, but it will be angled upwards, and I'm not filming what I think I'm filming. It's difficult to keep track of. And the screen is so small, and my eyesight is now so poor that I can't really see anything unless I put on my reading glasses and hold the Pocket 2 right up to my face. I started to think yesterday that it was time to abandon 4K on the GoPro when it is so hot. Shooting in 4K produces too much heat. And perhaps I should go back to using my Panasonic G85 more often. True, it is bigger and heavier, but it is very much a reliable workhorse. I don't think it will overheat, and the screen is big. It just works. It isn't as fidgety and delicate as a Pocket 2 or as temperamental as a GoPro. If only it had better autofocus. It's crazy that after all these years and after so much thought put into cameras in general, I still don't have a single camera that just does what I needed to do without complaint. I keep going back to the Olympus cameras in my head. Perhaps my life would have been much happier if I'd taken the time and spent the money to switch to the OMD EM5 Mark III or even the OMD EM1 Mark II. Would I be a happier man today if I'd done that? Or are there problems with those cameras that I'm not aware of? Once I'd come to the end of my time at the Ban Chin Alley, I walked back along the Ping River and returned to the SOHO. I had to get out of that sun, and I wanted to enjoy this room. It was actually pretty late in the day by that point, and other than going out to get dinner, I spent the rest of the evening here at the hotel. I just realized I haven't mentioned the breakfast. That was a big part of my day as well. I went down to the lobby, intending to just go outside and return to the Awake Owl for my breakfast. But a hotel staff member anticipated what I was doing, and she stopped me and redirected me into the hotel's actual breakfast room, and a large buffet spread was laid out there. I don't know the reasons for this, but I assumed that on my last visit there were so few guests at the hotel that it didn't make sense to put on a full breakfast. So they used the services of the Awake Owl. But this weekend, they have many more guests. This could be because of the holiday, and it was worthwhile for them to open up their own dining area. You still ordered your main meal from a menu, and I got the usual breakfast set plus rice porridge. That was brought to my table by a waiter. But I could help myself to orange drink and toast and coffee from a buffet. 5 or 6 other tables were occupied, and I was able to observe the other guests as I ate. I noticed 2 things in particular. Neither thing was particularly positive. I noticed that most of the Thai people at the other tables were quite fat. They were fat enough that I couldn't help but think they could benefit from skipping the large breakfast they were eating. I've never been a fan of fat, and I often wonder about married couples that become fat, particularly if just one of them becomes fat. There was one couple across from me, and I couldn't help but notice just how fat the man was. He was a young guy, much younger than me, but he had a huge belly and giant thighs. He was wearing shorts, and the design of the shorts were such that they couldn't really wrap themselves around all that fat. The result was that they were sucked in tightly around his crotch and his butt. It just looked so uncomfortable, and I looked at the woman sitting across the table from him, and I felt sure that he didn't look like this when they got married. And how must she feel now? Does she feel cheated? She married this guy when he looked normal, and now he was very fat. Does she feel upset about that? This fat theme was spread across nearly every table in the place. The other thing I noticed was that there was 0 conversation happening. Every single person, even those sitting at tables with friends and family, was absorbed by their phone. No one was talking. Every single person was staring at their phone, swiping through screens, tapping on things, and typing messages. No one was talking to their breakfast companions. I'm always sitting alone, but I rarely have my phone out while I'm eating. If I do have a phone out, it's because I'm listening to a podcast through earphones. I just checked the weather forecast, and it looks like today will be a comfortable day. It might be cloudy, but they aren't calling for thunderstorms or anything like that. The decision I have to make is which route to follow to Kamphaeng Phet. I can try to follow the small roads on the east side or the west side of the Ping River. I haven't been able to decide which side might be more interesting or more scenic. I think I will take the road on the east side. The small road on the west side looks nice too, but the main highway is also on the west side. That is the main highway that runs from Bangkok to Chiang Mai, and I want to stay as far away from that highway as possible. Sunday, October 24th, 2021, 6:30 a.m., room 207, Fig Boutique Hotel, Kamphaeng Phet, Thailand. For the first time in what feels like a very long time, I don't have access to a kettle or hot water of any kind, and that means no morning coffee over my journal. I was surprised when this room at the Fig turned out to lack a kettle. I've become accustomed to having one, particularly at this level of accommodation. And I would normally have my own travel kettle of some variety, but this time I have neither. I have had to content myself with plain water. The Fig in general doesn't seem to live up to its 3-star rating. Of course, I am no expert in hotel ratings. Staying in hotels as nice as the SOHO and the Fig is a somewhat new experience for me, thanks to viewers of my YouTube channel. However, I believe the SOHO had a 3-star rating, and when I compare the Fig to the SOHO, I feel the Fig should come in at a lower rating, perhaps a full star. It feels to me like a 2-star hotel. There is a vast gulf between my experience of the SOHO and my experience of the Fig. I met another guest here at the hotel, and he said the same thing. For the price, he says, it is a disappointment and it is overpriced. My final breakfast at the SOHO went well, and afterward I set about a leisurely process of packing. My goal was to rethink and reorganize how I packed my knapsack, and I think I was successful in that. On the previous scooter trip, I struggled when it came to accessing important items at certain times. Items became buried, and it was difficult to dig them out when I needed them. This time, I made sure to keep important items, if not near the top, at least in a pocket or a compartment that I could easily access. The key to this new system was taking full advantage of the knapsack's large laptop sleeve at the back. It's just wide enough that I can slide my documents and ID pouch into it and then array my Pocket 2 pouch and my LX10 pouch on top of it. This system gave me easy access to those 3 most important items. And then I made sure to put my GoPro accessories kit right at the very top of the other compartment. I put less important items at the bottom and put the GoPro kit on top of them. With this new system, the day passed with less frustration. I hadn't done this before because using the laptop sleeve makes the knapsack a bit wider at the bottom, and the knapsack doesn't slide into the gap at the front of the scooter as easily. However, I managed to make that work. I was comfortable leaving later in the morning because I didn't have far to ride, but I also hoped that by leaving later, I would give the morning clouds a chance to disperse. Unfortunately, the opposite occurred, and the clouds got thicker and darker as time passed. By the time I left at around 11 a.m., the skies were completely dark, and it was clear that it was going to rain. In fact, it started to rain the moment that I left Tac City proper behind and entered the countryside. And it rained for much of the trip. I rode through the drizzle and the light rain, but when it came down very hard, which it did often, I pulled over and stopped underneath whatever shelter I could find. In these situations, Thailand's trend of having many seemingly unused structures was useful to me. I was able to take advantage of overhanging roofs on many buildings that were closed and shuttered. If they were occupied, I likely wouldn't have been able to do that. One time, however, I was taken by surprise by an extremely heavy and sudden downpour, and I turned into the doorway of what I thought was a recycling center or mechanics shop. It turned out that it was more of a private home, and I was essentially taking shelter inside some family's garage. A woman in the home heard me talking to my GoPro, and she came out to investigate. Rather than get angry with me for invading their private space, she welcomed me and brought me a chair. I enjoyed the ride to Kamphaeng Phet, but it wasn't particularly eventful. I enjoyed the riverside scenery despite the rain, and I arrived in Kamphaeng Phet in the late afternoon. I liked what I saw of the town. It felt casual and spacious and friendly. Finding the Fig Hotel was a bit of a challenge, because it was located on the outskirts of town next to a busy bypass highway. This part of town is reserved for big commercial operations, such as the nearby Robinson's Lifestyle shopping mall. I'm more accustomed to hotels that are located in the downtown core. Being out there is fine though, because I have my scooter and it's easy to get anywhere. It's just that I can't simply pop outside and walk across the street to go to a 7-Eleven. While bringing my bags up to my room, I met a man on the stairs, and he said in English that I looked familiar. He thought he might know me through YouTube, and when I spoke, he recognized my voice instantly. His name was Danny, and he was a fellow Canadian. He was in the middle of what I think was a 2-week drive around Thailand in a rented car. He offered to treat me to dinner, and that evening we found ourselves enjoying a good meal at the famous Fatboy's Burger Bar. Danny had a steak, and I indulged in not one, but 2 barbecue chicken burgers with fries. While we ate those, Danny kept rounds of Italian sodas coming. Fatboy's Burger Bar was clearly popular and a local institution. The one knock against the place is that it is so popular that you'll likely have to wait a bit for your meal to arrive. A lineup of delivery guys on scooters waited patiently outside for their orders to be ready. As a dine-in guest, you have to consider not only other dine-in guests, but also the large number of home delivery orders. These combine to keep the cooks very busy, and your meal takes a while to be prepared. I was more than happy to wait, however. Danny and I had a lot to talk about, and the chicken burgers were the best I have ever had, and by a wide margin. The name of the place and the quality of the food would suit a much larger, much fancier and more yuppie style place. But Fatboy's Burger Bar is small and family run. The simple tables and stools belie the quality of the food. I will be returning today. My plan for today is twofold. I'm hoping to visit the Kamphaeng Phet National Museum, and I hope to return to Fatboy's. My timing is lucky because the museum is open from Wednesday to Sunday and closed on Monday and Tuesday. Today is Sunday, and this is my only chance to go there before it closes for 2 days. I don't think I will make any special effort to visit the historical park today. I want to experience the museum today and get my mental and physical bearings first, and then I'll visit the park tomorrow. Wednesday, October 25th, 2021, 5:55 a.m., room 207, Fig Boutique Hotel, Kamphaeng Phet, Thailand. Today is my second morning without a cup of coffee at my side as I type. It feels just as strange as yesterday. Instead, I have a bottle of cold water from the fridge, so all is not lost. I almost dropped by the Robinson Lifestyle Shopping Plaza yesterday to see if I could pick up a small, lightweight, and inexpensive kettle. Luckily, the instant coffee that they serve as part of the breakfast at the Fig is quite good. I don't know what brand it is, but I liked it. They start serving breakfast on their outdoor patio at 7 o'clock, and I will be able to enjoy a cup of coffee at that time. I met my fellow Canadian traveler over breakfast, and we had a good chat before he had to leave to complete his drive back to Bangkok. It was fascinating for me to hear stories of his life as an expat engineer in various countries. There have been many times when I've wondered if I'd have been content with a life's path like that. After all, with his engineering degree, he has been able to travel and live all over the world, far more than I have, and he has been paid handsomely at the same time. When I was in high school, I didn't have any concept of money being important. It never occurred to me that I should choose a career because it would allow me to earn more money. I'm not saying that I look down on money. I was far too dumb for that. I just wasn't aware of it. I didn't realize that increasing your income was a good thing for life. And in an interesting twist, I finally reached a point in my life where this realization is in front of me all the time. In the past, being relatively poor felt somewhat normal. I was younger and I was around people that were nearly as poor as I was. But at my age now, the people I meet and the people I interact with are generally retired or about to retire, and they are enjoying the fruits of a lifetime of working at lucrative jobs. And my situation doesn't make any sense to them. I look like I should be retired. Since I'm in Thailand and I'm not employed, the assumption is that I must be retired, and people simply assume that I can do all the things that they can do, that I have the freedom to do whatever I want and go wherever I want, that I have the hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars to do these things. But I don't have any money, and this leads to some funny situations and misunderstandings in conversation. I also get to have some fun with it. My new Canadian friend, for example, is leading the more regular, retired life. And when he goes traveling around Thailand, he does so in a nice rented car, and he spends as much time as possible golfing. And when he treated me to dinner last night, we went to the restaurant in his car. And for him, of course, driving in a car is no big deal. It's just what you do. But it's a rare treat for me to even be in a car. It just doesn't happen very often. And I never rent cars. I haven't rented a car even one time in 30 years. Another interesting aspect of that experience is that he used Google Maps to provide turn-by-turn directions to guide us to our destinations around Kamphaeng Phet. And I know that this is possible. On my last visit to Canada back in 2008 or 2009, my father had gotten some kind of device that did this for him, and I was quite impressed with how well it worked. When I drove in Canada at that time, I used it all the time to give directions, and I loved using it. But it never occurred to me to use it while riding around in Thailand on a scooter. I see people mounting smartphones on their motorcycle or scooters all the time, and they follow driving directions, but I never thought about doing it myself. But when I saw it being done that night, I thought I should give it a try. It's often that way with me. I often need to see an example of someone doing something in order for me to try it. I need a guide in my life. Another reason I decided to try it is that I'm finding Kamphaeng Phet to be a very difficult place to navigate. There is something about the layout of the roads that confuses me endlessly. I never know where I am or how to get to anywhere. This confusion is increased dramatically by the location of this Fig Boutique hotel. It is in the middle of nowhere and incredibly hard to locate. I go in circles all the time here. So yesterday, when I set off on my scooter to go to the National Museum, I fired up Google Maps and had the system give me audible directions as I rode. At first, I tried to just have the phone in my pocket and listen for the turn directions. But at speed, I couldn't hear them. So then I tried to use earphones. It took a while to figure out how to get the earphones to work, and the cord itself was a major pain. But it did work, and I was suddenly getting directions from my phone. It was fun for a while, but I didn't enjoy it in the end, and I didn't get much value out of it. I found the voice in my ear to be distracting and annoying. Later in the day, I stopped using it and just reverted back to stopping from time to time to get out my phone and look at Google Maps and figure things out for myself. As I left from my hotel yesterday morning, I was still not exactly clear about the nature of the historical park here in Kamphaeng Phet. I wasn't quite sure where it was, what it contained, and how you went there. I kept seeing one listing for the historical park on Google Maps, but it was located right in the heart of the town, and I wasn't sure how it was kept separate from the town, such that they could charge people money to visit it. Wouldn't you just be inside this park naturally as you rode around or walked around the town? This feeling was reinforced when, after riding for just a few minutes, I came across a temple ruin at the side of the road. This was Wat Sukhothai. It was an impressive laterite structure, and there was an information sign in English. I stopped the scooter and I spent probably an hour there checking the place out, reading the sign, and taking video and pictures. And I wondered whether this experience, just stumbling across ruins, was how you experienced the history of Kamphaeng Phet. But things did become more clear as the day passed. I learned, for example, that the historical park is generally considered to have 3 parts. The main part is a few kilometers outside of town. I'm not entirely sure of the name, but I've seen it called Khet Aranyik, which means forest district. Apparently, the monks from that time were divided into 2 groups. One group lived in the city, a second lived in more of a meditative retreat in the forest. Khet Aranyik is where the forest monks lived, and the preserved temples there make up the main section of the historical park. The second part is called Khet Nai, which means inner district. This district is in the middle of Kamphaeng Phet. In fact, the National Museum appeared to be inside this district, which made me wonder if I needed to buy a ticket for the park in order to visit the museum. The third district is across the Ping River in the separate town of Nakhon Chum. The ruins here are not as well preserved, nor are they inside a defined section of the park with controlled access. These ruins are simply spread out around Nakhon Chum and open for anyone to check out as they go past. And I suppose you could say that there is a fourth category. These would be the individual ruins, such as Wat Sukhothai, which are just scattered about the city and which you would just stumble across randomly. You don't need to buy a ticket to see these either, of course. The National Museum itself was a very pleasant surprise. It was much larger, much nicer, and better organized than I expected. As I mentioned many times in the video that I shot, the museum made me feel smarter. It didn't just dump a bunch of artifacts in glass displays and label them. It had organized its exhibits and its displays to guide the visitor through the knowledge you need to put everything in historical context. The displays guided you towards systems for understanding and retaining the information. On top of that, it was a comfortable visiting experience because the air conditioning was so strong. I appreciated that very much. It was also a welcoming place. I stopped at the main gates to shoot a bit of video, and while I was there, the security guard came out of his office to check to see what I was doing. I would normally expect to be yelled at and told by security that I can't do whatever it is that I was doing. But when I showed the guard my camera and indicated that I wanted to take a picture of the signs, he got out a broom and swept away some dirt and spider webs and leaves that had gathered on the ledges beneath the signs. He wanted to make them more presentable for my pictures. I was also worried about being able to take video or pictures inside the museum. The museums in Myanmar, for example, banned any kind of photography. They would also not allow you to carry your bag inside. With that experience in mind, I prepared myself before I went into the Kamphaeng Phet National Museum. I put my GoPro in my pocket along with extra batteries and memory cards and anything else I thought I might need. Then I could hand over my knapsack for storage and still have all the most essential gear with me. And there was a sign in the lobby saying that visitors have to leave their bags at the information desk. I was prepared to do that, but no one asked for my bag, and I was able to take it with me. Once inside the museum, I took a chance and I put my GoPro back on its full mount. Sitting on that grip and mount, it is easily visible, and it's clear that I'm wandering around taking video. And I shot video and talked into my gear in the full view of museum staff, but none of them minded. They just smiled and encouraged me to enjoy my visit. The museum even provided a very nice brochure about the museum in English and a large and detailed map of the entire Kamphaeng Phet area with all the historical and other interesting sites marked. After my visit to the museum, I wouldn't say that I am any kind of expert on regional history, culture, art, or religion. I would fail any kind of test on the subject, but I feel much better equipped to go to the historical park and understand a bit more of what I'm seeing and be able to appreciate it a bit better. The remaining big experience for the day was returning to Fatboy's Burger Bar. I wanted to have a good meal, but I also wanted to feature the place in a Planet Doug video. With that in mind, I even prepared my systems so that I could interview the owner. I put my Rode Wireless Go microphone onto the GoPro 3-way grip, and I set it up like a microphone grip. I wasn't sure I would actually go through with it, but I was in a good mood, and I asked the owner, Fatboy himself, if I could ask him some questions. And I held the microphone between us so that it would record both our voices. All of this stemmed from the knowledge that he spoke English. Without that, none of this would have been possible. The owner was very interested in my video project, and he helped me choose specific items from the menu to try out. As far as video goes, I have to say that once again, I'm falling way behind. Every hour of the day is taken up with just living my normal life, taking video of my experiences, and then copying those video files to my phone. That takes up my whole day. There are no hours left to edit and upload any videos. I really wanted to make videos and post them almost in real time, but I haven't done it. I haven't even posted a video from my ride from Mesot to Tak. I'm way behind again. I have to figure out a better system. My plan for today is to go to the main section of the historical park, which is, I think, the Forest District. There is a visitor center there, and there are 3 or 4 main temple ruins, plus about 40 others. I'm not quite sure how I will handle the filming part of the experience. I'll think about that over breakfast as I do some more reading. Thursday, October 28th, 2021, 4:25 a.m., room 307, Fig Boutique Hotel, Kamphaeng Phet, Thailand. This will probably be my last day in Kamphaeng Phet. I could easily stay longer, but I will try to think of it as my last day and live it as if that were true. I've been considering going to Sukhothai after Kamphaeng Phet. It makes sense to do that, since Sukhothai is so strongly related to the history that I've been exploring here. Plus, it is about 83 kilometers away, which isn't terribly far. My one concern is that since I've been spending so much time with the ruins of Kamphaeng Phet, that I might not appreciate the ruins of Sukhothai. It might be too much history and too many ruins all at once. But I think I will still go there. I don't need to spend a week there, as I have done here. I can spend just a couple of days and not feel like I have to see absolutely everything. The last time I made a note here in my journal, I was on my way to the first section of the historical park. At that time, I don't think I fully understood how the park was organized, but I understand it now. The official historical park is divided into two sections. The larger Khet Aranyik, or forest district outside of town, and the smaller Khet Nai, or inner district, inside the city itself. My understanding is that the monks from that period were divided into two groups. One group was more of a meditative bunch, and they tended to isolate themselves at the temples in the forest. The other group was more engaged with the local community, and they lived at the temples inside the city. I noticed on my various maps that there were two places where I could enter the forest district, but I wasn't sure which one was the main entrance. I knew there was a visitor center at the main entrance, and I wanted to go there. After some Google mapping, I thought I knew which was which, and I hopped on my scooter and headed there once breakfast was over, and I got organized with all my various cameras. I'm still recording my experiences in 3 different ways in total. 1, by writing in this journal. 2, by taking video of the experience. And 3, by running the Relive app and taking pictures for it. I'm enjoying Relive very much, but it does introduce one more layer of complexity to my technological life, and it takes some extra time to get organized. The forest district was far enough away, and it was extensive enough that having a scooter is essential. It really is the only way to truly experience the history of Kamphaeng Phet, particularly if the sun is beating down. I guess if I was bike touring, that would be okay too. I would have my bicycle for getting around. That would be physically more demanding, but it might even be more enjoyable than riding a scooter. But I have no idea how you would do this kind of thing without transportation of some kind. You definitely couldn't walk there. Just walking around inside the park itself would be exhausting. It turns out they do have some kind of guided tour on electric vehicles, but I don't know how that is scheduled, how much it costs, or whether it would be enjoyable. At the main entrance, I was given the choice to buy a ticket for just the forest district for 100 baht, or a ticket for both the forest and inner districts for 150 baht. But it wasn't clear to me what the time limit was for that. My plan was to visit only the forest district that day, so unless the combination ticket was valid for several days, it wouldn't do me any good. I got the 100 baht ticket. I wasn't asked to show my passport, which is lucky since I had neglected to bring it, nor was I asked about a vaccine certificate, which is equally lucky since I don't have it yet. There was much sanitizing, of course. Even the 100 baht note I tried to hand the woman was placed inside a basket and sprayed with sanitizer before she would touch it. Up until that point, I still had no idea how one got around the park. I was assuming, in fact, that I would be required to park my scooter at the entrance parking lot and then continue on foot. However, it turned out that the park had an extensive network of smooth, high-quality roads, and I was free to ride my scooter anywhere I wished. The only issue with that is that sometimes it wasn't clear where I could park my scooter. Larger temple ruins, such as Wat Chang Rob, had clear parking areas for vehicles. Wat Chang Rob even had its own set of very nice bathrooms. But other temple ruins had no parking area attached, and I had no choice but to park my scooter on whatever patch of dirt or grass was available. It seemed like this was what you were supposed to do, and it felt fine, largely because I was usually the only person there. But I wondered how things would work out in busier times when there might be hundreds of people in the park at the same time. I dropped in on the visitor center first, of course. I had a funny moment at the doors with one cat sitting on the inside of the glass doors and a much larger cat sitting on the outside. It seemed to me that these two cats wanted to get together and play, but I wasn't sure if this was allowed to happen, so I hesitated to open the doors. What if they were mortal enemies, and by opening the door I caused a major feline battle? But the fat cat on the outside appeared to be quite friendly and relaxed, and I eventually opened the door. I laughed when the cat on the outside just trotted inside, and the cat on the inside trotted past to go outside. They completely ignored each other. They were just like cats all over the world that always seem to want to go to the other side of whatever door they find. Cats just always want to be somewhere else. There wasn't a great deal inside this visitor center, if I'm being honest. There was a large-scale model of the park, but it didn't show very much. If I remember right, it simply had little lights showing the location of various attractions around Kamphaeng Phet, and the main display in the inner room wasn't about the Sukhothai kingdom or even the historical park at all. It was almost entirely about prehistoric times. There was no additional information about the temple ruins inside the park at all. That surprised me. The exhibits about the prehistoric era and then the Dvaravati era matched the information I saw at the National Museum, so I believe the two are strongly connected. But focusing on that older period in history seemed odd to me. I was expecting more in-depth information about what I was going to see inside the park itself. However, I still thought it was worthwhile. And I asked the young man at the information counter if I could ask him some questions for my YouTube video. He was willing to do that, and I tried to get the two of us on video. This was only the second time I'd attempted this, so I imagine it won't turn out that great. Plus, my questions were a little bit disingenuous because I already knew the answer to most of them. I didn't want to hit him with tough questions that he would struggle with answering in English. So I asked him simple questions about which temples I should visit and what the names of these temples meant. I already knew which three temples were the main attractions: Wat Chang Rab, Wat Pra Si Iriabat, and Wat Pra Non, what was special about each one, and what each name meant, but I asked him anyway. I think capturing that little conversation on video went okay. I haven't reviewed the video yet, but I'm hoping it isn't too terribly amateurish. Knowing my own habits and tendencies, I decided beforehand to limit my explorations. I went straight to the most well-known and the most elaborate of the ruins first. This was Wat Chang Rab. This temple has 68 elephant statues arrayed around the outside, and I knew that I would spend the majority of my time there. It would be my first temple, and I would have the most energy to get excited about everything that I saw. And then I planned to visit the two remaining main attractions. And after that, I would play it by ear. How many more ruins I visited and how long I stayed in Khet Aranyik overall would depend on my mood and energy levels as the day passed. This section of the historical park was a pleasant surprise. I was pleased with just about every aspect of my visit. The park was much more modern and well organized than I expected, with nice bathrooms, nice roads, lots of information in English, and a generous sprinkling of QR codes for even more information. The setting was park-like, with wide open spaces underneath hundreds of shady trees. The temple ruins themselves were fascinating, and the trio of main attractions were perfect in the way they contrasted each other with different styles. Wat Chang Rab was all about the elephant statues. Wat Pra Si Iriabat was all about the remains of the 4 large Buddha statues in the 4 classic postures: sitting, standing, walking, and reclining. and Wat Phra Non was all about the massive laterite pillars. The enduring image I came away with was of the 4 Buddha statues at Wat Phra Si Iriabat. That particular spot made the largest impression on me. The one major deficiency for me was the lack of information about how these temples operated and how they actually looked originally. It was pretty clear that the ruins I was seeing had very little in common with how the temples looked in their original condition. All of the outer coverings with all the artistic detail had washed away long ago. Only the bare bones of the laterite structures remained. And as a casual visitor, I was enthralled by these laterite bare bones. The park as a whole had very much of a romantic Lara Croft Tomb Raider vibe. I thought the laterite was beautiful, but I was also curious what these temples might have looked like before the centuries of time had taken their toll. But I didn't encounter a single image or artist rendition of their original appearance. Plus, I came away with zero idea of how this vast area of dozens of major temples operated. How many monks lived there? Who else lived there? How did they live? How did they feed themselves? What did they do all day? If I had a time machine and could go back to this forest of temples in 1347 AD, what would I see? Little in the park conveyed any of that information to me. I guess that is a failing in me. I need a better imagination. From the timestamps on all my various media, I can see that I spent just over 4 hours in the park itself. And that time included the visitor center, the 3 major temple ruins, and a bit of time spread out over some smaller ruins. Before my visit, I pictured myself dropping by a nice coffee shop afterwards, but I was too worn out to really enjoy that. So I simply rode back to my hotel to shower and relax. For dinner, I returned to Fatboy's Burger Bar and I had their chicken Caesar salad, plus fries and yet another pineapple Italian soda. That was a perfect way to end the day, particularly since I had figured out a fast and fun pathway through the confusing roads of Kamphaeng Phet to get there. Time appeared to be passing by quickly, and I started to consider how much longer I wanted to stay in Kamphaeng Phet. My mystery benefactor had booked 3 nights for me at the Fig Boutique Hotel. Those 3 nights were coming to an end, and as I was thinking about staying in Kamphaeng Phet longer, I started looking at my options for another place to stay. Left to my own devices, I would normally stay in a more budget-friendly place, and Kamphaeng Phet had a couple of those. There was the 3J Guest House, and I assumed that I would end up there. This traditional backpacker guest house was even located on the same road as Fatboy's Burger Bar, and I passed it all the time, so I knew exactly where it was. Once I did some research, I thought that maybe there might be a problem with staying there. Thailand just doesn't seem to be good value when it comes to these low-budget places. The cheap room they offered still cost 300 baht per night, and from pictures, that room looked to be small to the point of being tiny and cramped. Plus, staying in that room meant using a shared bathroom down the hall. I have absolutely no problem with tiny, cramped living spaces and shared bathrooms. Much, if not most of my life has been spent living that life. But 300 baht for that seems expensive. That seems like a 150 baht per night existence to me. The alternative, Paradise Resort, started to look better to me the more I looked into it. From the outside, 3J looked cluttered and small and closed off. Every time I rode past, all I saw were closed gates and closed doors. Even their parking area was separate and down the street and behind a locked gate. It didn't have a welcoming vibe from the outside appearance. But pictures of the Paradise Resort showed a wide open place where you simply ride your scooter right up to the door of your room. I liked the spaciousness I saw in the pictures. It looked easier to come and go as you please and be left alone. In the end, I didn't need to do all this legwork. My mystery benefactor, upon hearing about my desire to stay in Kamphaeng Phet longer, booked 3 more nights for me at the Fig. I was very grateful for that, as it meant I didn't have to spend a large part of one day just packing up and moving to a new place. As I wrote before, compared to a place like the SOHO, the Fig seems overpriced, but it is still an extremely comfortable place for someone like me. It offers far more luxury and comfort than I am accustomed to, so I'm extremely happy to stay here. The following day was a bit of a catch-up with my life day. I didn't go out exploring the attractions of Kamphaeng Phet hardly at all. As usual, I'm falling way behind in terms of editing and uploading YouTube videos of my experiences. I hadn't even posted a video from the very first day of this road trip yet. And I wanted to take a day and spend it entirely on working on some videos and other things. I did manage eventually to complete one video and upload it, but I didn't accomplish nearly as much as I'd hoped. Editing video is a black hole sucking in all the time you have available. It was still an enjoyable day though. It was actually a great day. The irony is that I really enjoy editing video and all the technical stuff. It only becomes a problem when there isn't enough time in a day to live your life, record your life, and produce a video of that experience. The production of an actual video is the part that suffers. My plan for yesterday was to visit Khet, which is the inner district of the historical park. It is much smaller than the forest district. I believe it contains 2 major temple ruins and then a special shrine to Shiva. However, just as I was getting on my scooter to go to the park, I decided to fire up the Relive app and a GoPro and ride around the city a bit. I thought it would be interesting to capture a bit of what the streets of Kamphaeng Phet looked like in a time lapse and post that as a separate video. And that little project started to get bigger and bigger until I spent most of the day on it. And I never made it inside the historical park at all. And I don't regret that at all. I was able to zoom around so much of Kamphaeng Phet and see so much and do it very quickly. I followed my usual route into the city's downtown, but on the way I passed a supremely ornate temple called Wat Sadej. I pulled my scooter into the gates and rode briefly around the interior of the complex. I treated this video experience much as I treated my time-lapse video of my ride from Mae Sot to Umpang. By that, I mean I deliberately stopped at what I thought were interesting sights and let the GoPro linger there for about 10 seconds. Since I was filming at 2 times speed, those 10 seconds should translate into 5 seconds of video. The final video should be an interesting mix of just riding through the streets, peppered with brief 5-second video clips of various attractions. After Wat Sadej, I stopped at the main clock tower. From there, I entered the area enclosed by the old city walls. I dropped by the Thai House Museum, the National Museum, and the Historical Park, and then I rode around the entire perimeter of the old city walls before crossing the bridge across the Ping River to visit the famous Wat Phra Boromathat and some of the other ruins in Nakhon Chom. The Wat Phra Boromathat is interesting because at 600 years old, it is just as old as many of the temple ruins in the historical park, yet it is in pristine and modern condition. I don't know what explains that. Why is this temple in perfect condition while the others are little more than laterite ruins. From Nakhon Chum, I crossed back over the Ping River and rode south along the river for a while. I thought I could ride through some market areas there, along the walking street and onto an island, but none of that was open or operational. But the video of just the river scenery will probably be nice. And finally, I rode all the way back to the Fig Boutique Hotel, following some of the more modern and commercial streets. The entire video, assuming I ever find the time to complete it, should provide a nice representative view of what Kamphaeng Phet, the city, is like. According to Relive, what was supposed to be a short ride turned into a journey of 3 hours and 10 minutes, covering nearly 40 kilometers of riding without ever leaving city limits. Once I finished this video experiment, I was pretty much done for the day. There was no way I could summon the energy to visit the historical park's inner district. That was put off until the next day, which is today. Instead, I went to the nearby Robinson Lifestyle Shopping Center. I thought about actually shooting a video about this shopping mall, and I would have done it, except that I knew I would never find the time to edit the video. Shooting video is the easy part. The time required for editing is the bottleneck in the process. But while I was there, I had a great time. The mall even had a camera store with actual cameras and camera gear on display. I hadn't seen a real camera store in the entire year and a half that I've been in Thailand. They even sold my dream cameras, the OMD EM5 Mark III, the Canon G7X Mark III, the Sony RX100 VII, and others. They sold the DJI Mini 2 drone. They even had GoPro accessories. I was in heaven for a brief time, and I mentally added up the prices I saw on display and wondered if I could afford anything. I had two main reasons for going to the mall. I thought it wouldn't be a bad idea to buy more memory cards. I really need more memory and faster memory cards. Unfortunately, the shops there didn't have what I needed. They had a better selection than any stores in Mesot, which carried next to nothing, but they still didn't have the 512 gigabyte cards I was interested in. The largest in stock was 256 gigabytes. But I didn't walk out of the mall empty-handed. In a fit of what might be madness, I bought a kettle. I was just missing my morning coffee so much, and I get super annoyed at the coffee being served in coffee shops. When I went to the mall, I went straight to a convenient Mr. Donut outlet to get a coffee. And after much hullabaloo, they handed me a paper cup that had next to nothing in it. It was just foam. When I picked up the cup, I nearly tossed it into the air by accident. I was expecting some resistance in the form of actual coffee liquid in the cup, but it was pretty much empty. And that annoyed me so much that when I saw a pretty good kettle on sale for 209 baht, I bought it. How could I resist? It is a bit too large to reasonably carry around in a backpack, but on a scooter, it is still okay. I have no idea how long I will be able to use it, but even if I use it for just the 2 days that I might stay here at the Fig, I'll be happy I bought it. I had coffee last night and coffee this morning, and I was so happy. This 209 baht kettle has already paid for itself. I'll definitely take it with me when I leave Kamphaeng Phet, but I could just as easily leave it here and still be happy that I bought it. And what about today? Well, I have big plans. I'm not sure I can deliver on those plans. But my idea is to make as many as 5 separate videos. Short videos. I want to visit Khet and the Thai House Museum and make videos about those 2 places. but I might also revisit the city walls and the famous temple in Nakhon Chom and make videos about them. And there is a banana market about 17 kilometers outside of town. Kamphaeng Phet is famous for its tasty bananas, and visiting this market might be a nice way to find out about that. That could also be a waste of time, but I won't know if I don't go. The other big news from yesterday is that DJI finally officially released the Action 2 camera. YouTube is abuzz with early breathless reviews. I am less convinced. Personally, I dislike the modular approach. The media mod approach that GoPro briefly adopted nearly destroyed that camera, and this decision by DJI will probably end up destroying the Action line. But I'm still enjoying finding out about this new camera. Its design is a novel concept. It is now 6:55 a.m. and breakfast will soon be ready downstairs. If I want to have any hope of shooting a lot of video today, I have to get ready and get organized.